Ever strap on a scuba tank and dive beneath the waves?
Yeah,
It's exhilarating, right? The vibrant coral reefs, the marine life, the feeling of weightlessness.
absolutely.
But like with any adventure sport, even with meticulous planning,
Mm-hmm.
there's always an element of risk.
Right.
And that's why today's deep dive, we're plunging into a topic you hope you'll never actually need to use. But if the situation arises, this knowledge could be absolutely vital. Emergency first aid for scuba diving accidents.
Important stuff.
We're diving into a section on accident management for divers to equip you with those just-in-case skills. Because in an emergency, knowing what to do can make all the difference.
Couldn't agree more.
Now we've all heard those stories, right?
Huh?
Divers surfacing too quickly. The bends, as they call it.
Yeah.
That's decompression illness, or DCI.
Exactly.
But what's actually happening inside the body?
So picture this. You have these tiny nitrogen bubbles forming in your bloodstream and tissue.
Well, I'm not the kind of bubbles you want.
Not at all. That's DCI in a nutshell. Now, it can manifest as an air embolism. That's where an air bubble actually enters the bloodstream.
Okay.
Or as decompression sickness, DCS, where those nitrogen bubbles wreak havoc.
So two different culprits,
Right.
but the first aid is the same.
Thankfully, yes. Whether it's an air embolism or DCS, those initial first aid steps, they're identical.
Okay.
And this is crucial because in a high-stress situation, you don't want to be overthinking it. Plus, it's actually possible for a diver to experience both simultaneously.
Wow. Double trouble. So let's say we suspect DCI. What's our very first move?
Your first priority is always to assess their responsiveness. Are they conscious?
Right.
If they are, we can gather some information, but if they're unconscious, we go straight to the ABCs, or rather the ABC HABES in diving first aid.
ABC Hayes. What's with the extra AD?
That's a great question. So it emphasizes the absolute priority in an unconscious diver. You need to ensure a clear airway and then immediately check for breathing. Then we move on to circulation, just like in standard CPR.
That makes sense. So let's say our diver is conscious. We want to keep them lying flat, right?
Absolutely. Keeping them lying down and as relaxed as possible is crucial because sitting up, or even worse, standing up, can drastically worsen their symptoms.
Why is that?
It all comes down to blood flow and those pesky bubbles. Changing their position can affect how those bubbles move through the body.
Okay, got it. So we've got our diver stable and lying down. How do we figure out what exactly happened during their dive? It's like trying to solve a mystery.
It's exactly like detective work. We need information, and often their dive buddy is our prime witness.
Right.
Even if the diver themselves is unconscious, their buddy likely has crucial details about the dive profile.
So it's like a scene reconstruction, but underwater.
Exactly.
What kind of questions are we asking here?
We need the specifics. Did they go scuba diving, or were they using compressed air? How deep did they go? What was their bottom time? Were there any forced or rapid ascents? And then about how they're feeling. Do they feel excessively tired? Where does it hurt? Any numbness or tingling? Trouble breathing? Every single detail matters.
And there's actually a specialized tool for this, right?
You're right. There's something called the Diving Accident Management Work Slate, a handy tool that helps keep track of all this vital information.
So when the medics arrive, we've got it all right there.
Exactly. It helps paint a clear picture for the medical professionals.
Speaking of medical professionals, we've gathered the intel, kept the diver calm and lying down. What about actual treatment? What can we do while we're waiting for help to arrive?
If a diver is breathing, oxygen is our best friend.
Okay.
And I mean pure oxygen, ideally 100%, delivered through a system called a non-resuscitator demand valve.
A non-resuscitator demand valve. That sounds pretty serious.
I know, it sounds a little intimidating, but don't worry, it's simpler than it seems. Essentially, it ensures the oxygen is only delivered when the diver inhales. This prevents a buildup of pressure in their lungs. There are different systems, but that's something you'll learn more about in your scuba diving certification course.
So it sounds like even with oxygen, we can't let our guard down.
Absolutely not. We need to constantly monitor their breathing, be ready to switch to rescue breathing or CPR if needed, make sure they're comfortable, protect them from extreme temperatures, and, of course, call for help immediately.
Right.
Because evacuation and proper medical care are essential, and that usually means a trip to a hyperbaric chamber.
Now, what if we're miles from shore and our oxygen starts running low?
That's a tough situation for sure. But here's the key takeaway. It's far better to administer the highest possible concentration of oxygen for as long as you can, rather than trying to ration it.
Okay.
Now, if you happen to have enriched air nitrox on board, that can be used as a backup, but only for a responsive diver and with a scuba regulator, not just any breathing apparatus.
Got it. Every little bit of oxygen counts. Now, here's a thought. If DCI is all about pressure changes,
Mm.
couldn't we just take the diver back down a little, like a do-it-yourself recompression?
I see where you're coming from. It's a common misconception. But trust me, that's a huge no-no. In-water recompression. It might seem like a quick fix in a desperate situation, but it's incredibly risky. It can actually do far more harm than good.
Mm.
Real recompression therapy, that's a very carefully controlled process carried out in a hyperbaric chamber with specialized equipment and highly trained professionals.
So we stick to first aid and getting them to proper medical help as quickly and as safely as possible.
Exactly.
This has been super informative, but I've noticed we've focused a lot on the physical response to diving accidents. But what about the mental and emotional impact? I mean, these situations, they must be incredibly stressful, even if you handle the first aid perfectly.
You're absolutely right. The psychological impact of diving accidents is something that often gets overlooked. Even if there are no physical injuries, the experience itself can be extremely traumatic. Divers might experience anxiety, flashbacks, nightmares, even a fear of returning to the water.
So how can someone prepare themselves mentally for that kind of situation? How do you build that resilience?
That's such an important question, and honestly, it deserves a deep dive all on its own.
Yeah.
We could explore things like pre-dive briefings that specifically include emergency procedures, practicing those emergency skills so they become second nature.
Right, right.
And even just learning about the psychological aspects of diving, like understanding the potential for these mental and emotional impacts. The more you understand and prepare for the unexpected, the better equipped you'll be to handle it, both physically and mentally.
That's a powerful takeaway. It's not just about knowing what to do, but also building that inner strength, that mental resilience for those just-in-case scenarios. Well, folks, we've resurfaced from this deep dive into emergency first aid.
Ha!
Remember, knowing what to do in a diving emergency can literally be a lifesaver. So stay curious, stay prepared, and until next time, dive safe.
Dive.